So today we're going to go ahead and talk about the type of surfaces that you have to choose from for your countertops when you decide to replace your current countertops. On our last video up here, you can go ahead and watch the 3 important questions that you should ask yourself before you even get to this stage. So if you haven't watched it, make sure you go back and watch it first. You got to watch the video first. So we're going to talk about about 6 different options. There are more out there, but we narrowed it down to the 6 that are most common, or at least most popular, and in different price ranges, and talk about the differences, the pros and the cons, and how we got to the surface that we chose. So the first one I want to talk about is laminate. So laminate is your least expensive option. It ranges anywhere between $15 to $40 a square foot. It does have a lot of design options for you to choose from, which is great. But the durability side is where it has some downfalls. Ultimately, it can burn. It can actually melt the surface if you stuck a hot pan on it. It scratches very easily, it delaminates very easily, and it's virtually impossible to repair. So that one was off our list.
So the next surface option that we're going to talk about is a little more expensive than the previous one discussed, and that's tile countertops. And that usually runs as low as $15 a square foot all the way up to $85 a square foot. So there's some great benefits to going with tile. A few of them is that there's a huge variety. And it's also quite heat resistance, okay? And there's somewhat scratch resistance as well. And they're also easier to replace one tile at a time versus replacing the entire countertops. However, there is certain drawbacks that will cause you to think otherwise about you using tile countertops. And the first one that I'll talk about is that it's very susceptible to staining, okay? And it's also a surface that can harbor bacteria in so many different ways, mainly through the porous surface of tile in general and through the grout lines that constantly need sealing. And the installation of tile, although they can start out low in cost, are going to climb up the scales of price-wise towards the end of your installation, because it is pretty labor intensive getting that stuff installed. So aside from that, tile is also very prone to cracking and chipping.
And ultimately, we were trying to get rid of our tile countertops, so that option was out. The next option that we'll talk about is granite. It's sort of the next in price level, and it can range anywhere between $60 and $100 a square foot. There's some really good things to granite. There's so many different design options available, lots of different colors and looks. And it's fairly durable. It can be heat resistant and somewhat scratch resistant, but there's some downsides to it as well. It may etch or stain, but really the downside for me is that there is some limit in design when you're looking at a larger surface. With 100 square feet of countertops like we have, we would have to use multiple slabs of granite, and the design will vary from slab to slab, and it never really matches up. So that was kind of a downside to me. Additionally, it is somewhat porous and will need to be sealed quite often. And sometimes your sealer is actually the thing that makes it a little less durable, because is that sealer as heat resistant or stain resistant or scratch resistant as the actual stone underneath? And oftentimes it isn't. Based on that, granite was out. So up until now, we've covered 3 different materials. We've looked at laminate, at tile, and at granite. And so far, they haven't met our 3 criteria that we talked about at the last video. So again, if you haven't watched it, take a look. None of these materials met all 3 of our criteria. Some met the cost criteria, some met the durability criteria, some met the design criteria, but none of them met all 3. So we continue to look.
Onward to the next surface in our search to find the right countertop for our household. We're talking about marble. Now marble, it's so eye-catching and elegant. It's very heat resistant in most cases. There's a variety of designs, and it also improves the resale value of your home whenever you decide to sell it. Now aside from that, the price is a factor at hand, because as we start looking at different options, we notice that the price is jumping up just a little bit more. And marble averages basically $75 to $180 plus per square foot. Okay, and that's just for the raw material itself right there, not including install and all that. So with marble, even though it's a great product, there are also certain cons that we have to take into consideration too. One, big thing is that will stain and etch, okay? In our household, that just didn't meet our criteria, okay? And it also needs to be sealed quite often. And the variation from piece to piece with the seam shading, marble is something when they put butted up together at the corners of a countertop, you can see the difference in shade where those two slabs come from different batches, because you're not always going to get that matching marble shade. Okay? And so with that being said, our search continues. So onward with our search, we came across an idea that's something that just hit us out of nowhere. What about concrete? We see concrete everywhere. It's so durable. They use it on roads, sidewalks, all kinds of things. So we started looking at concrete, and boy, were we taken back by the price. Not to mention, we thought it was going to be inexpensive, but it actually starts about $95 to $150 a square foot. And although the cracks can be fixed and it's customizable in many different color variations and shapes, there are a lot of cons to concrete as well. And it can be stained, it's very porous, it needs sealing, it's prone to cracking, and it's very, very heavy, which means that it can put a lot of stress on our cabinetry in the house.
So our search continued after ruling out concrete, and the last option we started to look into was quartz countertops. It started to look like that was going to be our winner because it really was starting to meet our durability factor. It is non-porous, it's stain resistant, it's scratch resistant, and it doesn't have to be resealed. So it was so far a front runner for me. Then we started to look into the cost, and that's where we started to change our minds a little bit. The cost was $100 to $180 a square foot, and that's not even including the installation. This is a very, very heavy product, so that cost is added into that as well. So it started to really get outside our budget, and then we found out additionally, it is not heat resistant. And for me, that was a big factor. So we started to dig a little bit deeper, still on the fence about quartz, and found out that it is really, really difficult to repair it if there was some sort of damage to it. So after all the factors that we considered, we started to ask ourselves, okay, if we decided to go with granite or marble or quartz, if there was some sort of damage, how would we repair that?
With epoxy.
So we started to think, why not do epoxy countertops? We'll get into that in the next video.